listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. Joining me right now is Dave Bossie. He's an old friend of mine. He's with Citizens United. We've done a lot of things together over the years, and it's so good to talk to you today, Dave. How are you?
I'm great, Martha. Thanks for having me back, but what a sad last week we've had.
It really is. I'm nervous about talking about prosecuting hate speech. I think we should prosecute people making threats. That's a whole different ballgame. I want us to be sure that we uphold Charlie's love of free speech as we remember him. Does that concern you at all?
I'll be honest with you, Martha. This is a battle over ideas. This is a battle between good and evil. And I'm not worried about Pam Bondi overreaching. I'm worried about the left's level of hatred for this great nation. And I'm worried that Charlie, his death is incredibly tragic. I don't want it to be the first of many.
Right.
There has to be a conversation about what is going on. How has this metastasized in this country? We've gone from the Reagan era of American exceptionalism and America's best days are yet ahead of it to is America in its twilight? It has America's best days already begun. And so I'm very nervous about the future of this country. But I can tell you, Charlie's death is not going to go in vain. We have to have these tough conversations. And I got to tell you, if the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi, who I trust implicitly, believes that people should be charged with hate crimes, then the left gets what they deserve, because they are the believers in the cancel culture, the hate crime.
Right.
These things never were talked about before, Martha, and the left created these things, and now the left is fomenting hate. And so I just look at it and I say, we have to be serious about it, but I'm not nervous about it.
Yeah, and I tell you, talking about having hard conversations, I mean, I've made it a point over the last week to make sure. I mean, I have Democrat friends, I have Democrat sources. I have made sure to talk to them since this happened, and there's been a bit of tiptoeing going on. I mean, you've got them saying nobody said it should have happened. Everybody said it was terrible. It happened, but they would say things like, "But he said some things," and I said, "You should never be killed for speech. You should never be killed for speech." And he also went to college campuses, Dave, and had good conversations with people. What I saw when I saw him go to college campuses, and I want you to share what you saw, was that especially with people that came up with questions that they thought he was going to disagree with them about, he was so kind. He would call the person by name. He would say, "I know that was hard for you to bring that question up. Tell me your story." I mean, that is the way we're taught to do things.
A wisdom beyond his years, and in his death, and I knew Charlie.
Yes.
So, and I think that it goes like this is human nature, but you don't understand or truly get the meaning or the power of the person's life until it's been taken,
yes,
until it's gone. And so now I realize what an important, not political leader, which he was, but an evangelical leader, that he brought the gospel. Look, I'm a Catholic, so I'm just not a reader of an expert of the Bible and that Charlie was. But the way that he brought Scripture and truth, and the Word of God into every conversation, and it led to who he was as a man and as a political figure. And I think that's what is coming out in these vigils across the country. Look, Martha, there's nobody burning cars, burning down city blocks, attacking police officers because Charlie Kirk was murdered. It is a different way that conservative Americans, that your average, I look at it like your average American, that's what you're seeing go out to these vigils. And you're seeing sports figures, artists, Hollywood actors and actresses. You're seeing the entire gambit from small town to big city Americans go out and take part in a vigil for Charlie Kirk, somebody a lot of people never heard of before last week.
Well, and I tell you, I think you see the real disconnect between what's left of the Democratic leadership. Now, I will give, Gavin Newsom put out a very kind statement about Charlie. There were no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but he had met Charlie, okay? And his sons, he said his sons liked Charlie, which I think is interesting. Bill Maher made a great statement yesterday where he said, but again, Bill Maher had sat down and met Charlie, and I think that's what we've got to do, Dave.
But Martha, I just want to say, and I agree with you. I agree with you that they were very nice statements. The problem is that the left's, and I'm not just going to say those two guys, but when the left calls us Nazis, when the left uses language that dehumanizes us for weeks, months, and years, okay? And and by the way, they tried to kill Donald Trump not once but twice. They tried to jail Donald Trump. They tried to bankrupt Donald Trump. They have done everything they can to try and smash this movement that is Make America Great Again. And so, yes, I do appreciate their words, but I want to see action. I want to see that last, yes. Right? Yes. I want to see that last, not just be a flash in the pan. Oh, Charlie, I'm so sorry. It's what are you going to do to change the way the American people who listen to you hear different words, not just a slogan.
Well,
after Charlie's death.
My dad was a POW in World War II, and we always had political discussions at the dinner table. He was that kind of guy. And he passed away a number of years ago, but we went back as a family about a year ago this time for the 80th anniversary of the Southern invasion of France, because his unit was involved in the liberation of a town in France. And these kids were out there, singing the national anthem, and they welcomed us like celebrities. And the thing is, to your point about the Nazi thing, and I've said this for years, there is no elected leader in the United States of America that's a Nazi. That means something. There's no elected leader in the United States of America that's a Hitler. Okay? And to use those terms cheapens the sacrifices that not only our soldiers made in World War II, but the people that were killed and in a real genocide, another word that gets used all the time, it takes away.
So let me just, you just hit on something that is so incredibly important, and that is generationally, okay? What I have been worried, and I know, and you and I have talked about this over the many years, but do we have the greatest generation, which your father was part of, do we have that in us as a society, as a country anymore? And because there's been conversations every time D-Day rolls around every year, do we have 18 to 20-year-olds that would storm a beach to free a society, to save people from a genocide? And you see our culture as it's really become more brittle, and you question whether or not there are those young men and women who would do that I now look and I see over the last 6 days an American awakening, a group of young people who are proud of their country, are proud to stand up, to say enough is enough, and we're going to have this great awakening and mean something for the future, for our children, our grandchildren's futures. That's what I look at, and I'm hopeful today.
Now, I know it's a long way to the midterms, but how do you think this movement is going to impact the 2026 midterms?
It's a great question. I'll start by saying, Charlie was obviously a political titan, and a political leader, and an incredible one at that. And he would want, I believe, his memory to be one that encourages people, that motivates people, and that's what I see potentially happening here. And I'm hopeful because in just 6 short weeks, there are elections, in big elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and some other states that have those off-year elections. And I think that is where the youth vote, potentially driven by Charlie's memory, driven by this event, are potentially can have a huge impact on these races. And then I think you're going to see this movement grow. You're seeing, and you and I have seen the headlines, 32,000 plus new chapter requests, high school and college campuses around the country for Turning Point, USA, Charlie Kirk chapters. And that's what I mean by a great awakening.
Absolutely.
There aren't 32,000 campuses.
I'm hopeful. I wrote a column about Charlie, as I know you did, what I've learned from him, and I jokingly said at the end, I'm not his demographic, right? I mean, I'm a 66-year-old born again evangelical Christian, but I've learned a lot from him, and I'm going to try to keep paying it forward, because that's all we can do, those of us that are left behind.
Yeah, he was a great guy, a great friend of President Trump's. I look around and I can count, on one hand, the reason that that Donald Trump was reelected in 2024. Charlie Kirk's on that very short list.
Absolutely,
he meant a lot to a lot of people. He didn't, no one deserves things, but Charlie Kirk did not deserve what happened. This crazed leftist, is somebody who's going to pay the price. We're going to see today, I guess, out in Utah, what they charge him with, how they do it, what evidence they present. But there's a lot. There's so many more questions and answers as of right now. And I know, like you, I'm angry, but I want the answers.
Dave Bossie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Martha, thanks for having me.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
We are so excited to welcome our next guest. It's Grace Stanky Vanderhei. Did I get that right, Grace?
Yes.
Yes,
correct.
Very good. Congratulations that you got married in August. How great is that?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun being in the next chapter of life, though, too.
It's the best. It's the best, honey, and it only gets better. Let me just tell you that. So my husband and I are in that place in our life where we're kind of traveling and having fun, and we've got kids and grandkids. It's just great. So it just gets better. But anyway,
I love to hear it.
Thank you. You're a former Miss America and also a nuclear engineer. So, I love Miss America. My daughter and I had mother-daughter tiara parties where we invited our friends over to watch Miss America. It was always such a great pageant. How did that change your life before we get into the topic we're going to talk about?
Yeah, becoming Miss America was, first of all, never honestly a dream of mine. It wasn't something I ever pictured. And when I went into the competition, I had become Miss Wisconsin, and I knew going into the competition, you get one shot. And I wanted to walk out of the competition with no regrets. And for me personally, as a nuclear engineer, I'm incredibly passionate about talking about America's energy future. So that's what sort of my platform was going into the competition, which was really unusual. It was called the Clean Energy, Cleaner Future. And then becoming Miss America allowed me to continue the conversation on energy on not just a nationwide level, but an international level. And it's incredibly exciting to now continue that in my career as a nuclear engineer, too.
Absolutely. So tell us, we get so many questions about data centers and about power generation. Of course, we're in Georgia where, we have opened up nuclear power plants for the first time in the United States in a very long time. We've got probably going to have a couple of more come online in the next decade or so. We've got data centers coming, and it's a topic that comes up. It came up yesterday with a listener who heard you were coming on. It also has come up with our Public Service Commission. So give folks first an overview, because I think AI is used for a lot of things. And we're talking about AI data centers and what that means for power.
Absolutely. So first of all, I do have to congratulate the state of Georgia in having Vogtle Units 3 and 4 come online. So a fun side story, during my year as Miss America, I spent my 21st birthday at Vogtle 3 actually watching the unit come online, which was really exciting. But when it comes to data centers and the power discussion, I think one thing that is easy to look at with these data centers is they just look like giant warehouses. But we don't really realize how much power they truly consume. Right now, these new data centers that are getting built, we are expecting them to consume about 400 watts per square foot. So when you look at that massive warehouse-looking building that doesn't look very exciting from the outside, you're talking about the equivalent of power in 1 square foot that requires to charge about 14 iPhones, to put it into perspective. So that's a lot of power being directed to just one critical structure. Now, what this does is this does allow us to help move technology forward with various uses for artificial intelligence. I'm sure a lot of listeners that we have right now use it in some way, shape, or form for work, or maybe for school, or for something else. And it all comes down to technology and human advancement comes back to having enough energy and electricity to do so. We're seeing a direct tie to having enough electricity to support technological advancement. And that's why we need not only these AI and data center sort of advancements, but also the power grid to support them moving forward.
And that's one thing we're trying to do here in Georgia. And I have said for a long time that, obviously Chernobyl was a real nuclear accident. But what happened here in the United States that kind of slowed down nuclear power generation was actually the system worked. I mean, there was a problem, alarms went off, and there was no actual nuclear accident that happened. But it did slow down nuclear power generation and the building of nuclear power plants in the United States. And now I think we're back on track there again, because it is a clean way to create energy, and we now know how to do it safely, cleaner than ever. Tell people why this is important as a climate solution.
Yeah, not just as a climate solution, but as a reliable energy source, too. One of the main reasons why I am so passionate about nuclear energy and so positive about it is it not only is it an emissions-free source of energy, so as a Gen Zer, right, who grew up with this existential dread of climate change and all that good stuff, I see nuclear energy as a way that we can control the electricity. We know how to operate this. We've been doing it for 60 years. We've been doing it well for 60 years. You brought up 3 Mile Island was the one that you were kind of talking about here in the United States. So 3 Mile Island Unit 2 had a partial meltdown in 1979. But yes, the systems responded accordingly. Radiation release was under federal limits. Everything that should have happened in a way as a response did happen. And then Unit 1 on the same site kept operating until 2019. And now, because of the result of this resurgence of artificial intelligence and data centers, that Unit 1 that kept operating until 2019 is actually restarting. And I'm part of the group that's helping with that restart, and it's incredibly exciting because I think we're seeing not only the need for clean energy moving forward, but the need for reliable energy as we've got these sources of energy demand that need 24/7 power. These data centers don't really necessarily just run during peak business hours. So we've got to make sure that we have that power available all times of day, rain or shine, wind or no wind, and whether or not we have the resources.
Yeah, I'm excited about what's on the horizon related to energy, because I think that we can not only as a country maintain our energy independence, we can get to the point that we are producing more than what we need, and we can help the world with that. And we do that already in many sectors of the energy field. But what is your thoughts about, or what are you seeing about where there is growth in nuclear power throughout the United States? I mean, I know we're not the only game in town anymore.
Yeah, certainly. So I would say that right now the United States is actually slightly falling behind when it comes to building new nuclear in comparison to countries like China that are currently building about 40 new reactors at this point in time. Right now, the U.S. has no large new reactors under construction. But what we are seeing is that we're seeing restarts of plants that recently were decommissioned. So I mentioned 3 Mile Island Unit 1 is coming back online as Crane. Palisades in Michigan is restarting here shortly. And there are a few others that are actually under consideration. Another one that has also been under consideration is VC Summer, which is sort of a similar plan to Vogtle 3 and 4, but it never finished construction. So they're looking at picking that construction back up. But what we're seeing in the face of new build is permitting reform. So looking at the regulatory guidance, making sure that it's efficient. We're not changing the safety value. We're not changing the rules in that capacity, but making sure that it's done efficiently and effectively to prevent any future time overruns or cost overruns when it comes to construction of new power plants. Now then from there, it's the advancement of the actual reactor designs themselves. Here in Georgia, you guys have a perfect example of that with Vogtle 3 and 4. They're AP1000 units. They are designed better. The technology has improved. We're also seeing a lot of discussions around things called small modular reactors and other types of reactor designs moving forward. So there is a lot of exciting things moving forward here with not just more nuclear units coming back online, but also the continued exploration of new build.
We're so excited to talk to Grace Stanke Vanderhei, and it is, she's a nuclear engineer. She's a former Miss America. She's a violinist. I mean, that right brain, left brain thing is going on for sure. You mentioned China. I want to ask you this one question, because do we feel comfortable that China is building nuclear plants safely? Because I always get concerned when we're not doing it, because I know we in the West are going to do it and Japan even are going to do it to the highest standard. Do we have any concerns about that related to China?
I think that's a very valid concern and a very valid thing to bring up. And I think it's the perfect example of why the United States needs to be back at the forefront of nuclear technology deployment, not just here domestically, but internationally. We have the largest operating fleet as of right now, creating the most megawatts of nuclear electricity across the globe, and we're also the safest at it. We are the best at it. And so I think that that's incredibly important to highlight and to utilize our skills, our lessons learned, and why not let the United States be an international leader when it comes to nuclear energy development and operation.
Absolutely. Grace, if people want to know more, where's the best resources to get information so you get good information?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think websites like whatisnuclear.com are great places to just learn about nuclear. If you're looking to learn a little bit more about the technical places, otherwise I utilize the American Nuclear Society a lot for different forms of news as well, with updates about regulatory permitting and reform, and then in addition to new builds and everything else going on in that capacity. They have a thing called the Nuclear News Wire, where they send out updates multiple times a day about everything happening in the nuclear world. So it's an exciting time.
Grace Vanderhei, thank you so much for being with us today, and best of luck to you. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
There was an appearance related to Jimmy Kimmel in the last few days, and Nexstar, which owns a bunch of ABC affiliates, made the decision not to carry Jimmy Kimmel anymore. That led to a decision of ABC saying they were going to suspend him. I suspect he's got the same problem Colbert's got, that that he's losing money as a show because he's an expensive show to do. But Lisa Wexler's joining me right now, and she has some concerns about free speech, as I do. But I want to hear your take on this.
I think that this is extremely clear in a causational line, that this decision was made quickly, and it was made as a rapid response to Brendan Carr, who had created a podcast, who had been a guest on a podcast that day with a conservative podcaster named, I forgot, something Johnson.
Benny Johnson.
Who I'm frankly unfamiliar with. But in any event, Benny Johnson is interviewing Brendan Carr, who's the chairman of the FCC, and they're talking about this. And first of all, Benny Johnson, in my mind, completely mischaracterizes the content of the speech. You just played it, which I appreciate, Martha, and it was a funny joke. And it points out what we know about the president, which is he has an extremely short attention span. And it's a normal kind of a satire, and it had nothing to do, if we want to get into the content, this was nothing about Charlie Kirk or what he stood for or blaming MAGA Republicans. Benny Johnson went into this whole tirade with Brendan Carr, and Brendan Carr is listening to this and saying, well, we can either do this the easy way or the hard way. Okay, so there you have it. So the federal government is now inserting itself into deciding very specifically when it comes to criticism of the President of the United States that someone's ability to speak should be pulled. That is, I don't think it comes any clearer, and you know that I'm a lawyer, and for whatever it's worth, I won the American Jurisprudence Award in Constitutional Law in law school. It is my baby, and I did my thesis on the Supreme Court at Johns Hopkins as a kid. And I will tell you that this is a very clear, very, very clear violation of the First Amendment. It couldn't be clearer. It couldn't be clearer.
What I would say is, though, is that people that are in a business like ours is at the risk of being fired all the time. And
yes, I understand that. But yes, we can be fired, Martha. But the government, the FCC, has no business telegraphing that they are going to instigate the firing as a result of criticism of a public official.
Look, I hear you on that, but I think you're giving too much power to Benny Johnson and a podcast and Brendan Carr.
Definitely, I don't think so.
But the point, I think, is that I think what you're going to find with the Jimmy Kimmel show is that it was losing money just like Stephen Colbert, and that this was that ABC and Nexstar, because Nexstar really kind of started this, because they have about 200 and some affiliates that are ABC affiliates, and they said they weren't going to carry the show anymore. And then
ABC... They said it, but they said it in response to this. And
right.
They're going to backtrack, and it may very well be losing money. We understand that. And it may be that all these heads are going to roll. Jimmy Fallon will be next.
But you know what? I think Jimmy Fallon does a better job of actually being entertaining. As, I think both Colbert and Kimmel have become, they're just not funny anymore.
It doesn't matter.
They're just unwatchable. Well, it does matter because it's a ratings game.
No, it doesn't matter. No, Martha, it doesn't matter. Today they're coming after Jimmy Kimmel. Tomorrow someone's coming after you. The next day they're coming after me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is not coming from a rational decision in the boardroom. Oh, they're losing money. This is coming as a knee-jerk response to what's happening in the public marketplace. And I will tell you that one of the reasons the Republicans did so well in this country is because they hated cancel culture, which came from the Democrats and the left. And they are repeating the same mistake.
No, I will agree.
Get into the same trouble.
I will agree with you about that, because I do think what's different about Kimmel is the fact that the FCC weighed in at all. Now, granted, when you're in the radio station business, and I'm sure they do the same thing in the TV station, is every year we have to justify our license, and we have to submit what we've done for the public good, and, the kind of public affairs programming and all that kind of stuff to show that we're presenting all sides of things, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there is a fear between a kind of a regular fear between stations and their licenses and the FCC. That's been there long before Donald Trump, and will be there after Donald Trump.
Yes. But it's a very, and frankly, the regulation of broadcasting has always walked a fine line with the First Amendment.
Right.
And that's why there have been some cases here and there, and we understand that. But when you get into this, when you get into how dare you criticize my president, and we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way, you're just walking right into a collision with the First Amendment.
I think on a bigger level, what we're going to see is possibly in this lawsuit that President Trump has put against New York Times that we could see an overturning of New York Times versus Sullivan, because I think that what has led to where we are today, where we are, just like the funding in politics has come out of the Citizens United decision. The decision of Sullivan versus New York Times has allowed this kind of talk against public figures to where they cannot really defend themselves, and has allowed it to escalate. And one thing I'm looking at is what will happen with this case that, someone's got to bring a case that's got standing that might overturn Sullivan.
Well, Sullivan, just to let our listeners know, created a 2-tier standard of review for libel.
Right.
And for defamation. And the 2-tier standard of review was that if it was done in a reputable publication, you had to prove that the publication maliciously created the untruth.
That's right.
Correct. And if they didn't have malice, then even though if it was untrue, they could get away with a retraction, an apology, something in tiny fine print on the 35th page. But that would be enough for them. They didn't have to pay damages.
But, it's funny. I look at this. Yeah. I look at Sullivan. I look at Citizens United. And I look at the abuse of HIPAA laws kind of in the same thing. Because it's something that was put out there for a good reason, but it's been so abused and expanded that it's not anything what it was supposed to be in the first place.
Well, do you think that we should go to the British standard where if it's simply untrue that they have to pay a lot of money?
No. I think speech, I kind of separate, and you tell me if I'm crazy here. I kind of separate whether you keep your job or not from the free speech aspect. Because to me, what's different about this one, and I'll give you this point, okay, is that it's the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, making that statement. And that's a governmental agency. So I will give you that as being the difference. But in general, in all of these cases we've seen in the wake of Charlie Kirk, where people have been making really disgusting comments about him, and they are doctors and lawyers and teachers and whatever, and maybe they've lost their job. To me, losing your job is not the same as losing your ability. They didn't lose their ability to have free speech. They said what they wanted to say. But there were consequences to what they said.
Correct. Yes. And I agree with you, Martha. Once again, we agree as reasonable people.
Yes.
You have to be responsible for what you say. But in America, the government doesn't get to censor you. And that's the difference.
So Joe asked the question, was it the FCC comment or was it the affiliates refusing to air the show? What do you think?
I think it was the FCC comment spurring the affiliates' refusal. That creates, so you've got the issue of causation, and then you've got damages, Joe. Because in a lawsuit, which I think like a lawyer, one doesn't mean one without the other. So the damages were, Nexstar said, we're not pulling you. We're actually censoring your speech. And I believe you can draw a line as to why they did that.
So
that's the problem.
So Mary in Gainesville said, my thought on the Kimmel comment, it's not about the joke of the president, which was funny. It's about the first part when he was misguiding and saying that MAGA is trying to make the shooter non-MAGA when we have facts out there. There have been misinformation in the news, and I think he was putting his spin on it to keep the doubt out there about the shooter. That was the last straw for the network to pull him. That's from Mary in Gainesville.
Mary, again, you may be right, but the interference of the FCC is the defining difference in this story.
I hear you. And it's kind of like what I used to tell my children, is that you can take something where you're right and you can make it wrong how you handle it. Okay? And that's kind of what happened here. The FCC should have not commented about it. Anybody that represents the FCC should have not commented about it. And I realize that emotions are high and that people all over are concerned about what they saw happen a week ago, which I think we all should be.
And I also think the irony is that Charlie Kirk himself
was a free speech person.
Yes. And I think that that's the irony in the marketplace of all these jobs.
Well, I mean, just look at what
people are losing their jobs.
Just look at what Pam Bondi said, and she had to walk it back, where she said there's a difference between free speech and hate speech. Well, you know, I think hate speech that incites violence, I think we do have laws on the books that say go out and kill people, that is something that you can do something about. But she had to walk back because, do you know what? My view of freedom of speech is you can say anything, no matter how horrible it is, but I have the right to say what I think about it without anything being done to me. We are allowed to have that back and forth. And that's what the free speech is.
Upsetting. It's deeply upsetting that the Attorney General doesn't understand free speech.
And I hear military people, and you know military people, they say all the time that they are defending your right to say those obnoxious things.
That's correct.
You know,
that's correct.
Yeah. So I think,
it's very troubling.
I think that when this is dug down in, we're going to find out that Jimmy Kimmel's show was probably losing a ton of money too.
But it doesn't matter.
I know it doesn't matter. I hear you. But I think his employers were looking for a reason. That's what.
Well, if this is the reason they look for, they should get slapped back down. This is a very bad reason. This is a very bad precedent for America. This is bad.
And Lisa, I appreciate your comments on this and your knowledge about it, because you do know what you're talking about. You are a lawyer and you are an expert on constitutional law. And I think we all ought to not have knee-jerk reactions, and we ought to look at each situation individually because we're Americans.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
King Randall I from the X for Boys in Albany, Georgia. And I traveled for Senator Perdue and then for Governor Kemp, the entire state of Georgia, and used to love going to South Georgia. And I came across this on social media a couple of weeks ago, and this is an issue that I have really cared about for a generation because I knew we were doing something to boys. And in this case, it's primarily African-American boys, but I don't care if they're white boys, brown boys. We are discouraging them from being men. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think the X for Boys is on the right track. So, King Randall, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. And, you know, I usually don't just scroll social media and then reach out to somebody on something. But I saw the work that you were doing, and I loved what I saw because it was teaching boys to be self-sufficient, to understand real skills. But then I loved the fact that somewhere in the process you get them a really nice suit so that they can present themselves in a really positive way. So tell us about the X for Boys.
Sure. The X for Boys program is a program that began in 2019 when I was 19 years old. I'm 26 now, and I started this program mainly because here in Albany we didn't have any rehabilitative programs for juvenile offenders. And not just juvenile offenders, but any real programming that I thought would actually change the minds of the children. And I also have discovered that there's nowhere safe where it's cool to do the right thing. We don't have any major spaces really anywhere where we really praise children for doing the right thing. The only time kids see people get rewarded is when a kid's being bad, and when they're not bad, he gets a lollipop at the end of the day because he didn't do the wrong thing for the first time. But there's this kid who's been sitting in class, who's been doing his work every day, who cleans his room, he does everything his mom asks him to, and he doesn't get any rewards. He doesn't get a pat on the back, etc. So one of the things that I want to do was to create a space where it is cool to do the right thing. So that child that, you know, every day is looking for somebody to say that I'm proud, you can come to the X Voice program and get that. So that way they don't start going the wrong way because, well, this kid's getting all the attention and he's being bad, but everybody keeps telling me I should be good, but I'm not receiving anything from that. And everybody needs to know that there are good rewards, you know, when you do the right thing. Even though people say, well, you know, you should just do the right thing anyway. Yeah, but you reap rewards for that as an adult. You reap rewards rewards for doing the right thing. So we want to give that to our kids. So we started out teaching them how to work on cars, work on houses, such as general automotive repair, how to change oil, how to change brakes. We started painting houses with them. We do firearms training. We've done welding. We also do reading. Reading is a big thing because many children don't know how to read. We've run into that issue so much with kids ages 11 to 17. We have kids in middle school and in high school who can't read simple words. And that's where a big issue of mine had come from, and we started our book club with starting to read Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. So teaching them that they can make it out of whatever bad conditions they're in while also teaching them how to read. Booker T. Washington had a very extensive vocabulary, and he taught himself how to read. And so I always told the kids, imagine a former slave having a better vocabulary than you, and we didn't go through any of those things that they went through. So that's our big, thing right now. We're teaching, reading. We're teaching automotive repair. We're teaching character, etiquette. We teach them, how to sit at the dinner table and eat, how to have conversations with girls, etc. Many different things that we try and teach our students. So that's kind of just a basic idea of who we are and what we do.
So how did you get into this?
I started this out of my house. I lost my job when I was 19. I was driving a forklift during the graveyard shift. And apparently one evening I fell asleep for a couple of hours, I was told. I don't remember falling asleep for a couple of hours at all. I still don't remember even falling asleep. But they said I fell asleep for a couple of hours, and they fired me, and I asked my family members at the time, I was like, hey, can I start a summer camp out of the house? And they were like, why not? And so I started out of my dining room, and I posted a couple posts on Facebook to my local community, and I told them what I wanted to teach. And I had 20 parents believe in this 19-year-old kid at the time, and they dropped the kids off at my house every single day for the entire summer. And we learned so much. I made mistakes. They made mistakes. We figured things out. And at that time, I had no idea what a nonprofit was, no clue about a 501c3 and any of that stuff. I'm just helping kids. And so somebody came along and was like, look, you got to shut this thing down and get all this stuff squared away first. And that came around 2021. So now we're actually official, of course, and, got all the I's dotted and T's crossed. But that's kind of how I got started. Just a young teenage boy who wanted to help the community. And here we are. I'm 26 and we're still going.
So you also got a little flack recently on social media because you did have a little boy who was white in this program. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah, so people don't realize that where I live in Albany, Georgia, this is a 77% African-American town. It's one of the few towns that are like that. And so when people see the program, you see mostly black children. They think, some people think I only take black children. I'm like, no, it's just that's kind of all I get that signs up. I don't turn anybody down. But we've maybe had 4 or 5 kids, who were not black. So that means Hispanic or Asian or whatever. And we've had them come through the program. But I was told, on social media, like, well, keep this program. This is a great program. Just don't add white kids, because if you add white kids, then you're going to ruin it and you're going to ruin the mission and all this stuff like that. I'm like, how exactly would the program be ruined for adding a white child? I mean, they have to coexist, them as adults. So why would I not have them here? They need the same things that these kids need. I don't understand why I shouldn't add them. And so we did have another child sign up this year for the As a School program, and I decided to highlight it because I'm like, no, you guys need to see this and how these kids get along, how they love each other, how he's not treated any differently, and everything's normal. I want them to see that, because why would you say that a white child is going to ruin the program? But I don't even think they really believe that. I just believe, what media has done to our minds, what social media has done to our minds. We have people hating each other that have never met one another. We're hating each other off of these ideologies that people are posting on social media and our algorithms are giving to us, and not actually having conversations in person. Because black people sometimes will say, well, white people are racist, but they've never actually encountered any racism itself, or any of these conversations we have all over social media. It's never happening in person. None of these conversations we fuss about and talk about all day on social media never happen in person. Every day in person, you're just having normal conversation, normal people talking about normal stuff. But when you get on social media, it's all this hate and all this and that, and we hate this person and we hate that person, and it's not an actual thing. like in person.
Right.
And so that's what I want to show people, like actual regular life. Like people love each other in person. People adore each other in person. People engage with each other in person. But on social media, you would think the world is in chaos when every day regular life is just happening. And it is not what's on social media.
You know, it's funny because I watched this story on the BBC where they bring people together that don't get along with each other on social media and then set up for them to meet in person. Okay. And so there was this particular situation where there was this older white guy who was they had a home secretary that was she was British, but she was Indian. She was brown. And he was saying all these horrible things about her because, you know, immigration's kind of a hot button issue everywhere. Horrible things. So they get together, they meet in person, and they find out they're both single parents. They find out they both kind of like the same things. And on the way out of this meeting, they asked this man, who's your typical keyboard warrior in his basement, you know, the whole thing. Would you say bad things about her now? And he goes, no, because I know her now. And, you know, that's just it. I always say on my show, you need to vote, you need to parent your children, and you need to have a face-to-face conversation with someone. And because I think it's economics and education that separates us, King. I think that it is, you know, it's if you're a white kid from Appalachia or you're a black kid from Albany or you're a brown kid from somewhere out in the Southwest living on a reservation, what separates us is our education level and our economic opportunity. It's really not the color of our skin.
Yep. I don't understand why people don't get it. It's all in really the class, like you're mentioning now. But it's all up to us, you know, to try and change those narratives and continue working. So one of the things I pride myself on is actually working in the community. Yeah, we got a little flack, you know, when I first started out. And, we started when we got invited to the White House by President Trump and things like that. We got a little flack, but because it's me and my community, people are actually willing to listen to me because I spend time in the community. One thing I don't do is spend time, you know, talking on shows or anything like that without coupling it with work. Some people feel like, you know, some of the things that people say are disingenuous because they're like, well, how can you talk so bad about us and you're not trying to help? So when I say things, you know, about the community or different things like that, my community listens because I spend time with them. I spend time in the community.
What is your goal long term?
I don't really have a specific goal long term because I'm discovering more and more things all the time in regard to the city of Albany. Well, I will say this. My goal is to see the city of Albany, Georgia, thrive. I don't have this overarching national goal to fix the whole world or anything. I tell everybody, focus on where you are. And if everybody focused on where they were, things would be better. I'm not trying to fix anything in Washington. I'm not trying to fix anything in Texas. I'm not trying to fix anything in Florida or even the city next door. I want to fix the city of Albany, Georgia. There's so much that needs to be fixed here. So many kids who aren't eating, so many kids who don't have food, so many parents and people who are living in hotels, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be able to fix that and help people get out of their conditions. That's my whole goal, is to fix the city of Albany. And if I do that in enough time, then I have more time to do other things, then sure. But for right now, my big goal is fixing the city of Albany. And I started with the kids, and now we're maneuvering into the government side.
Well, and I'll tell you, folks, I came across King Randall the First, and I got to ask you, is that your real name, King Randall the First?
Yes, that's my
okay.
Yes, my real name. My son is King Randall the Second.
Okay, very good. I like it. But I think that, you know, I came across it, and I felt called to make a donation. And I usually don't do that. I usually don't talk that much about the donations that I make. But I felt this has been so important because I've been talking about how we've been leaving boys behind for years, and you're doing something about it. And I appreciate very much that you do it. I was happy to be able to give a few dollars. Folks, if you want to know what King is doing, what's the best way to find that, King?
Sure. Yeah, you can follow me on all social media at New Emerging King, or you just type in King Randall. It'll pop up somewhere. And our website is thexforboys.org. That's THEXFORBOYS.org. You can go there and see everything you want to see, from the financials, the 990s, until the seeing what we're actually doing with the students. Sign up for our newsletter. Anything you want to do will be right there on the website.
Well,
and you can also follow us on socials from there.
I tell you what, you probably need to figure out a way to get in contact with Elon Musk, because since you're calling it the X for Boys, he might actually help you out with it.
He retweeted one of my tweets last year, and his retweet helped us to be able to renovate our facilities, our after-school building.
Wow.
That one retweet gave us everything we needed, so he didn't even have to help directly. He just retweeted one thing, and they bought everything on our wish list. We got smart boards, laptops, desk tables. We got the building redone completely because we bought an old building with old electrical wires and all this old stuff. We were able to get all that replaced, get everything painted. We bought vans because we didn't have transportation. He helped with all that just with a retweet.
Wow.
So I'm grateful for that one retweet that he did.
So it sounds to me like what we need is some balance with social media. So there's good things that come from it, like Elon Musk retweeting your tweet and all of that coming out of it. But but there's also bad that's coming out of it, where people are getting so mired in the negative, whether it's the death of Charlie Kirk or it's whatever it is, that we got to find that balance. And I don't know if you're a faithful person or not, King, but I think that balance comes from Jesus Christ.
Of course, absolutely. You have to be faith-based. I mean, that's one of the reasons we don't take government funding. We only do private donors. We just try to stay away from that. We take government grants or anything. They try and police how you teach and police what you say, and you can't do this religious thing or whatever. We are completely, a private program. And we're funded basically just from our donors. And so we share what we're doing. We keep people on our newsletters. We send emails, and we do what we can to try and fundraise that way. So that way we can stay away from government funding. So that way we can keep teaching what we want to teach and keeping God first.
Well, King Randall the First, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the X for Boys, and we'll talk again.
All right. Thanks, Ms. Martha.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.